The Omega Beam. Full power.
Welcome to the Omega Beam, episode 200. I'm your host, Orren Merton. For those who listened to the Omega Beam for a while now, you know that episode 100 was a special episode in which David Raiklen joined us to look back at the entertainment in the genres we cover and to look forward to where we thought things might go. Now for episode 200, David Raiklen joins me again to discuss two things that have really come to the forefront in 2023. Our first topic is toxic fandom in our genre and what we can do about it. And then we discuss AI, artificial intelligence, how it's been represented in our genre over decades. And that leads into the current generative tools and the promise and pitfalls that they have for our genre. I'm biased, of course, but I think we had a really good discussion. So let's dive right in. Hello, I am here with David Raiklen on episode 200 of the Omega Beam. Golden will join us for the next one.
Yay!
Yay! So David was with us at episode 100 when we took stock of entertainment, how things had been, where we think things are going. So I think the 100 episodes is a nice place to have more of a issue episode as opposed to just talking about entertainment alone.
Big
and at
picture.
the end, we're going to introduce a small new segment that we will have going forward. But I wanted to talk about two things that I think last year in particular, 2023, looking back, and certainly going into the future, are going to be a real thing. We'll start with what is unfortunately, I think, had an effect on the success of some wonderful projects, which is toxic fandom. And after that, I'd like to talk about artificial intelligence. AI is kind of this big buzzword. And obviously, first starting about how we here talking about science fiction and superheroes and all these things. I mean, science fiction has had representation of AI since Isaac Asimov. I mean, since the beginning almost of science fiction. So it's very relevant to what we talk about here. But also, we like to go behind the scenes a bit so we can talk about how today's technology has affected what we've been seeing and how we think it might affect things in the future, and what the promise is and what maybe the pitfalls are. So starting with toxic fandom, we've said so many times on this show that we try and keep everything positive, and we're not going to harp on things we don't like. We just don't talk about things we don't like. We're going to just focus on the things we do like and the things that are good. So I say this without pandering. I say this because it's who the audience is. It's who you are. Thank you for not being toxic, because we know that the people who are toxic get nothing out of our show. You know, we don't feed that fire. And I think we've seen in 2023 some really great projects where even before the movie comes out, they get review bombed at like Rotten Tomatoes. So their audience Rotten Tomatoes score is like stupid low and no one's even seen it. But, you know, women are in the lead, or they've gender bent characters, or they've taken characters and given them different ethnicities, or sometimes just the subject matter. I remember a lot of reviews for Black Panther when it came out. Not reviews, I mean, not like actual reviews, but some of the fan scuttlebutt was just really upset. Like, oh, they made Black Panther woke. And it's like, what? It wasn't woke. It was just a great Black Panther story. It was the kind of story you would have seen in the comic in the 60s.
Yeah, exactly. The funny thing about toxic fandom and comics in particular is the whole concept of Marvel in the 60s was to kind of push all the boundaries of comics and to have different stories and different characters and things that nobody else was doing. And this wasn't done out of cynicism. It was done because the creators were genuinely fed up of doing the same thing, and they were willing to, just try new stuff. But to their great credit, when they found something that worked, they didn't just let it be. They kept trying to improve on it.
And even in those earliest of comics, you had a kind of, well, in the case of Superman, it was completely obvious. But even in Marvel Comics, you had a pretty left-leaning bent. And this idea that comics got woke, I mean, Action Comics #1 in the 1930s, Superman breaks into the governor's office and basically gives him the Socialist Manifesto. He basically says you're about to execute the wrong person, and I've got the right person for you. And they're like, you can't break into my house, and Superman just says, you bet I can. I'm here for the people. I'm not here for any government, any organization. I protect citizens and civilians. That's who I am.
Yes, and Superman did public service announcements about bigotry and being tolerant of everyone, that was the American way in the 40s and the 50s, and they've been circulated on the internet since the 20th century. I remember seeing those in in chat rooms and that kind of thing. So I really have to wonder about what cave people have been living in who think that it suddenly got woke. They've been doing this for not years, not decades, generations.
Exactly. And, it always makes me so sad when you have fantastic entertainment, really well done things. I mean, we talked about in the last episode, we talked about the Marvels and how good it was. And there's not one single reason that it didn't do well at the box office. I've heard anecdotes that it's actually streaming very well on Disney Plus right now, but it was one of those review-bombed movies from angry fans. And it's so sad that it's a small number. It's not like, oh, well, the entire fan base didn't, no, we're talking about a small number of people, but they're very loud and they're very angry and they're very entitled.
Well, that's what the social media platforms really are best at. They're best at amplifying a small thing into a big thing, otherwise known as going viral. But there's kind of variations on that are maybe not one person or one meme going viral, but some attitude going viral that makes you think that many more people have that than really do. Just like, the viral video, well, one person makes it, but millions of people see it. So, there could be 3 people, one who's American, one who's Russian, and one that's not even a person but a bot. And those and those 3 can generate stuff that can go quasi-viral and look like there's much more of that out there than there really is, and that can change hearts and minds and pull people along. And the reason why I say it in this context is that that's directly tied, and I think toxic fandom is also very closely allied with conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
The idea that there's some secret thing happening that's bigger and more elaborate than anything ever done in human history, just to make you feel uncomfortable.
Right.
And that's the real explanation. No, it's not. That's totally delusional. But those things spread like wildfire.
Yeah, it is. And it's funny, too, because talking about Marvel and the Disney products and their, that world, people thinking, oh, Disney's trying to change people. And you realize that I don't mean this in the political sense, but in the way that they do business. Any corporation the size of Disney is going to be naturally conservative with a lowercase c about how they do business because they don't want to lose money. That's why when James Gunn, one of their most successful directors, who in addition to directing 3 of the best Marvel movies, also was a producer on a lot of them, and they relied on him to punch up scripts and things like that. When he was caught with some compromising tweets
from 10 years before,
the anger... over the anger of Kevin Feige, they fired him because Disney is not in the business of courting controversy. Disney is not in the business of trying to, control what people think. They're in the business of feeding people what they want.
Yes, and they have new markets by creating a program that has new actors that are not the same as the old actors. And it's actually very logical, but they were so conservative, lower C, that it took them a long time to understand that, if we have more women in the leads, then we get more sales. And if we have more people of color, then we have more sales. And the people who are boycotting don't seem to understand that this was a business decision that was based on the numbers. And if the bigoted people don't want to watch the show, because it has a character that makes them feel uncomfortable, Disney is still making more money because they have this big new audience who does like it. And I think at the heart of it, that's kind of what really makes them most angry. But now, it had to get so extreme that even a giant corporation like Disney is taking advantage of the changes in demographics and that they can, distribute their stuff all around the world. That, there's billions of people that we can sell to that aren't you guys. So if you don't want it, that's okay. You can watch the old shows.
Yeah, exactly. So then the question, the Omega Beam's mission of keeping it positive, I think the next thing I would want to talk about is what can we do? How can we, who don't start these rumors and everything, who don't bomb, who don't review bomb movies we haven't seen and all these other things, what can we as people do? So I have a couple ideas. One thing we can do, first of all, never try and get in a argument with these kinds of people because unfortunately they don't listen to reason.
The way I like to say it is you can't reason with an unreasonable person.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly true. But what we can do is we can just spread our own good faith. We can just say we like the things we like. And if other people don't feel you need to defend it, if you saw the Marvels and you liked it, just say, hey, I really like this. This is really good. That's it.
Yes.
You don't need to get in fights. Just tell people what you like and just be proud of it. It's a small, simple thing. But in an online space where these few really angry voices sort of drown everyone else out, just don't let them drown you out. Don't engage, but just don't let them drown you out.
Yes, I agree with that. Also, I do believe in free speech, but free speech is not freedom from consequences.
Absolutely.
So if somebody posts a logic fail, I'm not happy with anyone who posts a logic fail, which includes things like ad hominems, where you attack the person instead of the argument, or where they do glittering generalizations, where they say that everybody says this without presenting any evidence that anybody says that except them.
Sure.
Those things I just delete. So
yeah. Yeah, like you were talking about ad hominems, I saw one thread on a social media site that was it was actually not it started talking about the Marvels, but it was I hated the Marvels, I hated Captain Marvel. They're so terrible. I can't believe this is what Marvel is degenerated into. And when you kept reading, people were like, "Oh, I really like Captain Marvel." What and at a certain point, he stopped trying to make arguments and just said, I hate that Brie Larson is such a open feminist. Okay, well, first of all, that kind of outs you as a jerk because the fact that she's an open feminist is fantastic. And the fact that she supports her fellow actors when they are trying to come up in a very, very hard industry that's great. That's wonderful. And that's to be lauded. But second of all, that has nothing to do with any of these films whatsoever. I mean, that is not a comment on the writing, the direction, the production, the music, her personal talent. That's just, you don't like her politics, and that's a bummer, and that's not a comment on the product.
Well, let me just say that when we're talking about movies in particular, the only reason that somebody gets cast in a major role in one of these movies is because they're a star with a big following. And that's it. Their political views can't be too extreme, or they could not have become a movie star. So just the fact that that person, Brie Larson, let's say, is in the movie, is proof that they are well liked and their views are not extreme, because there's no way
moderate enough.
Yeah, exactly. that they're moderate enough and liked by millions of people around the world. So, saying that when people complain about the talent or the politics, it's like, you guys need to get a reality check that motion pictures is like a $50 billion industry, and it's resting on, a few hundred actors.
Right.
Those people are chosen very carefully.
Right. There is so much risk in this industry that the last thing they want to do is take on extra risk.
Right. So I'm glad that the Marvels is doing well. It doesn't mean that they're going to do another Marvels movie, but they'll probably hire her again.
Right. I'm sure we're going to see the characters in other projects, but this may be the last sort of team up we see. And that brings me to the last, or the two things I wanted to say about what we can do to support things is, these companies that make these movies, Disney in the case of the Marvels, or, Warner Brothers in the case of the DC movies, or, whomever releases indie sci-fi stuff, they look at the numbers. So I think it's really important for things, if we like them, I'm not telling anyone to do anything, watch anything that they, for something they just don't actually enjoy. But if you enjoyed something and you found out later that there's this toxic fandom backlash against it, support it, stream it, watch it on Disney Plus. If you're, like we are, we tend to buy things. We tend to buy the digital copy. We bought a digital copy of the Marvels, even though it's available. We watched it on Disney Plus, but we also bought it because we just want them to see another sale.
That really matters. That really matters. And sometimes the sales difference is not that big between something that's successful and something that's not. So your individual sale can actually move the needle a little bit, because the market has become much more diverse and fragmented. The fans actually probably have more impact now than they did 50 years ago, when there were very few alternatives.
Yeah, very true. So support the things that you love.
Support the
Even
things
if you
you
already
love.
saw it in the theater or whatever, watch it again on streaming services, just because it will make a difference. The companies, the people who make decisions, they will see the numbers, and those numbers will make a difference, and a lot of times things that may have initially been flops have that second life, and it will matter, I mean, I think last time with the Marvels, I brought up Blade Runner, which when Blade Runner was released in the early 80s, it was not, now it's considered like one of the most seminal science fiction genre pieces ever done, that influenced so many other movies and was everything else. But at the time, it was just kind of a middling Harrison Ford movie that didn't do what they hoped it would.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I don't know if you mentioned, also go on Rotten Tomatoes, and you don't have to write much of a review. Just, give it 4 stars and say, I liked it. And that makes a difference. And, It's just sort of your way. I think it's sort of a way. Same thing with a book or a game that you like. It's a way of showing your appreciation for the author or the team that made it, right?
Yeah.
It's a very simple thing, takes a couple of minutes at most, and, you can do it totally anonymously.
Yeah, absolutely. And to end this segment, the reason that people talk about toxic fandom, the reason we're talking about it right now is because even though it's the minority and it's not you, I mean, I'm talking to you, listener, but truly it's not you. It's a loud group. It's a very, very loud group, and they tend to drown everyone else out. So that kind of makes it imperative that the rest of us do step up. And we don't have to be loud. We don't have to be obnoxious. All we have to do is quietly support the things we love and just make sure that the only numbers that get seen are not the numbers of the angry, toxic people, that the rest of us get our say as well. And slowly but surely, those toxic people will just get bored and they'll move on to other things. Once, that's the thing, they want an audience. And when they don't get one, they'll move on. So I would, I don't like those people in my corner of the universe. And the sooner those of us who are more reasonable and moderate can help them on their way somewhere else, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes. So use social media to show that you like something, even if you do it anonymously. Buy the product, even if you're only going to watch it a couple of times, it makes a difference.
Yeah, it definitely does.
And remember that physical media, like a DVD, may seem old-fashioned, but they can't shut off your access to it remotely like they can from something that's a digital download.
Yeah. All right, so moving on, let's talk about our other topic. So I would like to talk about Eliza. Not a lot of people, I think, who are listening probably know about Eliza, but Eliza was one of the first natural language processing computer programs developed in MIT in the 60s. And it was effectively the very first artificial intelligence chatbot. But it wasn't intelligence. It was simply programmed interpretation of human speech and parroting it back. So it would ask you, how was your day? And you would say, it was okay. And it would parrot back, why was your day okay? Say, I got stuck in traffic. Why were you stuck in traffic? That it wasn't actually interpreting your words and thinking about it. That's intelligence. But what it was doing is it was actually parsing your language. And that is, God, what was that, 50 years ago? Or 60 years ago? 60 years ago was that. And I bring that up also because that really fired the imagination of science fiction writers, of people like Gene Roddenberry. And what would computers be in the days of Star Trek? They spoke to their computer on the USS Enterprise. They said, computer, do this for me. And computer would answer back, okay, affirmative.
And Majel Barrett would.
Yeah. And it would do it.
Do her computer voice.
And she was the voice of the Enterprise computers all the way through Next Generation.
Yeah, and she's still the voice of the computer to this day. Before she passed, she recorded an extensive library of phrases, which have now been organized into a database where they can construct sentences from all the words. So they can, type in a sentence and the program will find those words, and then, it'll have to be massaged a little bit to get the inflection right.
Yeah.
But yeah, the computer is they did the same thing, by the way, with James Earl Jones for Darth Vader.
I'd read about that. Yeah. So, that has been inspiring science fiction forever. You've got Isaac Asimov and his laws of robotics and,
which are great.
I mean,
the first rule of robotics, you must not harm a human.
Right. And that was, that's AI. That was science fiction's first sojourn into AI. And it was one of those things where it was informed by, I think, real research and just the inspiration of what could we do with this. And you not only had, I mean, you had Gene Roddenberry and Isaac Asimov who were very, who had these positive, I think, views of the world, but you also had all your post-apocalyptic and AI is going to destroy the world and all these other things as well. I mean, look at the Terminator. I mean, that was AI literally destroying the world.
Well, it's kind of interesting that basically since the beginning of science fiction, wherever you put that, somewhere in the 19th century, there was a balance between utopias and dystopias. And
right.
that stayed true right up until about the turn of the 21st century. And then there became more and more dystopias and less utopias. And, Star Trek is more utopic, while Star Wars is more dystopic. And, that's still there today, except there's more people trying to imitate the dystopic world of Star Wars than the utopic world of Star Trek. In other words, if you watch, say, an episode of The Mandalorian and you watch an episode of Strange New Worlds, they're both cool sci-fi, but the philosophy, the attitude of the writers is so clearly different worldview.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, like you said, science fiction writers have always been there's been that tension between the utopic and the dystopic, and they've always been at that cutting edge line of which way will it fall? Are we going to use AI tools to make our world the best it can be, or are our AI tools going to get away from us and end up destroying our world? And this brings us to 2023 was really a watershed year, because that's when you had ChatGPT suddenly in the world. You had deep fakes, AI video all over. And I think for a long time, for years previous, you've had things like generative tools in applications that have used machine learning to do things like help you mask somebody out, when you're doing CG effects in movies and things like that. But really, it was 2023 when that sort of it hit the masses. Well, part of it is also marketing. I mean, what we're really talking about is generative tools trained on large language models through neural networks. I mean, ChatGPT is not sentient, and it's not making independent decisions and thoughts. So it's not what we're talking about in the movies or anything, the true artificial intelligence. If you're ever wondering if a chatbot is truly AI or not, remember, if it was true AI, you wouldn't be asking it questions. It would be asking you questions, because it would be a life form and it would be curious about you, just like we'd be curious about it.
Yes, that's very true. Well, what's happened is the ability to fake being sentient or fake being creative has gotten really good. And this creates an illusion that it's smarter than it really is. And if you know the program, if you know the app, you can feed it prompts or ask it a question or whatever that will reveal that it is completely clueless. It's just, it's gotten harder to do that because, they've iterated it zillions of times. That's all been automated. So they've covered up the obvious things. Right now, I tell everybody, including myself, that when I see something, especially in social media, I should not share it until I've looked at it closely and maybe do a Google reverse image search on it to find out what it really is. And I don't think most people are going to go through that. And that's where it gets scary, because people are taking for granted that it's real or taking for granted that it's smart. And we aren't there yet. Thank goodness we aren't there yet, because if we were, the AI would just completely crush us, because the humans are so divided and so disorganized that a really smart AI would be able to take over the world so quickly. So we're actually really lucky that we haven't replaced ourselves yet, but we can replace certain professions. And that's where the problem is people not looking and listening close enough to tell, am I being spoofed? Is this a fake? Is somebody lying to me and just telling me what I want to hear? But, that kind of critical thinking, a lot of people never develop that. And that's really where the issue is that, you got to verify stuff now. You really do.
Right. More than ever. Absolutely. And
because anybody can be fooled, no matter how smart you think you are. You can be fooled. And this has been studied that even highly educated, highly intelligent people can be conned for years and have no clue that all the things that they think are true about that person or that project are all lies.
Yeah. And that gets to one of the fundamental aspects of what it is to be human is that we make tools and our tools can be used for good or for ill. We can make a hammer and that hammer can build a house. That hammer can be used to help us do amazing things, or you can hit someone in the head with it.
Yes. AI is kind of like having a automatic hammer that can hammer like, a billion miles an hour.
Yeah.
And that's why you have to be careful because it's easy to get flooded with stuff that's fake and then you start to lose touch with what's real because you're not seeing anything real anymore. You just get used to the fake. So you have to really watch out. And there's someone, a famous science fiction writer that I don't want to name because I like him as a person and I like him as a writer, but he shares whatever he thinks looks cool. And
I think I know the specific writer you're talking about.
And the images do look cool, but it's gotten to the point where I'm not even sure if he knows what's real and what's fake anymore.
I don't think he does. I think some of the times you pointed out that an image is AI, I think you probably took him by surprise too.
Yes, well, his attitude about it is, it's not going to take anybody's job. It's not good enough. And it's like, well, it's not going to take your job because you're already famous.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing about tools. It's inevitable that as technology advances, someone is going to get left behind.
I think it's really people losing jobs, especially in CGI. And for any purpose, whether it's industrial or in a movie or whatever, just, the graphic designer who's doing the flyer for your local church or temple, those people are really in danger of losing their jobs permanently because what people talk about, the people who are promoting this, and I'm dealing with these people every day, like the editor at a magazine that I work at is a total AI enthusiast, and he thinks that it's the greatest thing. And they talk about how efficient it is and how it's going to make it easier for everybody to do stuff.
I think it's pretty clear, like you were saying, that AI was going to have such a huge effect in CG and both in putting people out of work, but in how they use it. So I don't know how many people are aware of this story. It was certainly out there, but when I guess it was season 2 of The Mandalorian came out, ended with this amazing return of Luke Skywalker. So it was done in a very interesting way. They brought Mark Hamill on set and they had him, he's now older, he's thicker, and they just had him play the scene. Just so they got a sense of how Luke Skywalker would act in this moment. And then they brought in a younger actor to physically do the part. And for the face, they used various CG and de-aging things and all. I thought it was amazing. It was wonderful. It was incredibly well lauded. Well, as it happened, it did kind of have a little uncanny valley in the look. And what happened was some guy on YouTube who's really proficient with AI deepfake video technology, he redid it himself using deepfake technology, and it looked better. And so what happened was Disney hired that guy.
Yes, it's a great story.
To then then he was using the AI deepfake tools in subsequent productions that they've done on Disney Plus. Clearly, AI is going to have a massive effect in just movies in general, but specifically in science fiction. I'm sure it's going to have a massive effect in ways you don't know. Not you, David, but you, the audience. For example, a lot of movies you may not realize they're color corrected. They run the video through a process to change the color, either maybe subtly because the lighting wasn't quite right, maybe a little bit more dramatically because maybe they filmed a nighttime scene in the middle of the day and they make it look dark when it wasn't. Maybe just artistically. Maybe you're just Zack Snyder and you want everything to be desaturated as hell. They do a lot of color correction, and that is normally done by post-processing engineers, but you can do that with AI tools now. And so you're going to see a lot, like you were saying, you're going to see a lot of jobs, people who had been ace color correctors who would be hired by all of these movies. Either they are going to be using AI tools and able to do a lot more, or they're just not going to be hired at all because this person who's already the editor is just going to do it themselves while they're editing as part of their editing process.
Right. And that could be a whole thing there. But I'd like to go back to an earlier technology for just a quick moment. Okay. If you've ever seen a vintage color movie from the 1930s, like, say, Robin Hood, a lot of people like Robin Hood because it's this great swashbuckling adventure fantasy, and you're not supposed to take it seriously. And it's so fun that it still works. But part of the reason it works, beyond just the fact that the actors are charismatic and the script is very clever and, it's a timeless story, is that the color process was about making it look cool. It wasn't about making it look real. They wanted to make it look cool. So it still looks cool by a certain aesthetic standard. If you can get into, that point of view where, they want it to look kind of, colorful and in your face and kind of old fashioned, but very sparkly at the same time, that kind of aesthetic, they nailed that. So that's really what a lot of the technology could be, is not trying to make it real, but make it cool.
Right.
And I think that it's going to be very we'll have to wait and see. Yeah. Because when it's automated and the AI is doing it, the AI doesn't know what cool is.
No, it's not sentient. Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would say, and this is how it's been, I think, forever and will continue to be, is that really artistic people are going to be able to use AI tools to do amazing things. And the reason is that it is the creativity of the human that is directing these powerful tools. And that is the combination that is unbeatable, is a creative mind with tools that allow that mind to really express itself. When you let the tool do everything, it's going to look samey at best. It's going to look samey.
Samey is a good word for it. The thing is that a lot of AI stuff looks cool-ish.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean, it kind of, it reminds me of something that I saw before that was really cool. And so it kind of evokes that. And there's probably a good, simple reason for that that's what it was trained on. And that's what it's been reinforced that, okay, these are the cool things. And there was actually a comparison that somebody did where it turns out that Getty Images, which, they have some good things they do, they have some bad things they do. But one of the good things they did is they generated, or they developed an AI, a GAI video and still program that they trained only on images that they had licensed. They didn't scrape anything. It was only stuff that they had licensed. And they have a lot of high quality stuff. Getty Images is way up there in terms of the top 2 or 3 in the world. And somebody A/B'd that with what ChatGPT, DALL-E did, and what Midjourney did. And a lot of times the stuff that was trained on everything instead of just what they owned looked better.
Right, because it had its large language model, its LLM, was a larger language model. It had more data. Yeah,
and so that makes me, concerned that the the race will be won by the people who are breaking the rules and ripping off people. And
Right.
then before the legislation or whatever can catch up with them, they'll cash out or whatever, or the marketplace will already be so stilted towards them that they can drag out the lawsuit, for 10 years. And by then they'll have a new technology. So that's the kind of thing that I'm concerned about, is that artists will have had their work ingested and have a cheap imitation coming back to them. As Paul Simon said, all my words come back to me in shades of mediocrity.
Yeah. But you yourself, the listener, if you're thinking, we're not trying to make anybody feel guilty about enjoying AI tools. We're just saying be cognizant of what you're doing. If you're just looking up stuff for fun, I've gone to ChatGPT and said, what is this song about? Speaking of AI not knowing anything, I went to ChatGPT and said, what is the song Silent Hedges by Bauhaus about? And ChatGPT popped back, oh, Silent Hedges isn't a song by Bauhaus. It's a song by Tones on Tail. And it's like, no, it's not. It's a song by Bauhaus. I mean, are you asking like an old goth, what's a goth song? I mean, come on, dude. I know this stuff. But yeah, so it doesn't always know what it's talking about, but it's fun. It's fun to play with, and it's fun to explore for role-playing games, for Dungeons and Dragons and stuff. If I want a picture of my character, I don't have the money to hire an actual artist to hundreds of dollars to draw a character of mine for a single session at a table. So, go to Dolly and just say, give me an elf with dark hair, and it'll pop something out. And you go, okay, I like this. And the thing is and I bet if any of you play games like that, you probably either do or did what I do or did, which is you would just go to Google and go to image.google.com and just do a search for, dark hair elf and, just search 5,000 photos until you find one you like and go, okay, this one. Well, AI is basically the same thing. You're basically just typing it in and it's popping one out for you. And you go, okay, I'll take that. But don't feel bad about stuff like that because you're not making money off it. You're not taking somebody's job away. It's just, if you're ever going to do something that will be public, that isn't just for you, that isn't just for your table, your friends, etc., and you're using some kind of generative AI tool, just think about it. Like David said, people believe things that they see, and be careful. You don't want to take anybody's job. You don't want to mislead people. I'm not anti-AI. I think it's a great technology. I just really want it to be a force for good in the world.
A force for good in the world. This is getting close to wrap up, but I want to take just like maybe 60 seconds to mention Sora. Sora.
Oh, yes.
If you have not seen Sora, just Google it and you can go and see the videos. There's at least a couple of people on YouTube that have taken all the Sora videos and edited them together into one video so you can just sit down for 10, 15 minutes and just watch what it can do. When that came out, that week, the week that it was released, and this is from OpenAI,
right?
Hollywood canceled development plans that they were already going forward with to build more sound stages in movie studio because it was so good.
For those who don't know, this is a text tool where you could type in text. It'll pop out an entire video from a text prompt.
Yeah, it's not stills, it's videos, and it's not, quote, animation. It looks plausibly like live action. And it's so good that it really this was the earthquake. And it was a sort of a quiet earthquake as far as the general public, because these projects hadn't actually, broken ground yet. But the studios decided that this is developing so quickly at creating locations and creating characters, etc., that we need to rethink our model about needing to actually build studios with sets and actors.
Yeah, I read that.
Now, I don't think that's making the world a better place, is deciding that you're not going to invest all that money. You're not going to hire all these people. Instead, you're just going to wait for the app.
Right. I read that Tyler Perry did that in Georgia, that he had like an $800 million investment he was going to make in Georgia studios, and he pulled it.
Yes. Other studios were not as forthcoming. I think it was actually kind of noble of him to be upfront and tell people what he was doing, because other companies, they just quietly did it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's too bad, because again, it will make things look samey. If obviously I'm sure various companies they're gonna do their own versions of it. They're not just gonna be using OpenAI's version, but it's gonna make things look samey, and that's too bad, because samey is we want diverse and wonderful and all of that. We want people to be creative, and for their creativity in production to be on the screen, and for us to see their crazy, wild, wonderful ideas, and not just what a app pops out when you type in the text prompt. So use AI, enjoy AI, but be careful and be cognizant and understand the negatives as well.
Just tell the truth. If you used AI, say so. Don't try and fool people or yourself that you did it if the app was doing it, because that's not good for your soul, and it's not good for the rest of the world. If you did it with your own hands, great. If you had somebody help you, great. Give them credit.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I want to end with a new segment that I think will carry forth on all the Omega beams. It's just a short little check-in of what are we watching. So, David, what are you currently watching?
I'm currently watching season 2 of Halo, which I'm enjoying more than season 1. And I also recently watched Echo. Mm-hmm. And that was one where I didn't love every episode, but I'm glad that I went through the whole thing, because there were some really cool moments in it.
It's good to hear you say that, because I watched the first one and there were parts of it I liked, and there were parts of it that made me on the fence. Not because they weren't good, but just because I was like, is this the kind of story I like? Because I'll be the first to admit that I tend to root for, maybe it's because I'm a Boy Scout, but I tend to like the, Captain America, Superman, the intentional heroes, the ones who aren't anti-heroes. I mean, some of the anti-heroes are great, but I also like the ones who are like, I am going to do what's right because I can, because I have the ability to. And obviously, Echo I was immediately drawn into her backstory, because she's definitely had a rough time of it and has made something of herself by her own bootstraps. But she's not quite heroic, more just a very successful and engaging survivor.
Yes. And well, Daredevil is sort of the aspirational hero in that show.
Yes, he is. He's the aspirational hero in there. So, but and I liked enough of it that I was like, do I want to continue? So I appreciate you saying that, because you've inspired me to take on episode 2.
Well, just skim through it. There's no law that says that you have to watch every frame or read every word or listen to every note. It's perfectly fine to say, I really liked that part.
Yeah. And we're also watching Halo, and I completely agree with what you said. I enjoyed season 1, but it kind of had the feeling, I talked to you about saying it was kind of like the spaghetti season, but it was like, throw it all against the wall and see what sticks. It was, I haven't played the video games, but I know there's a ton of lore over a lot of different games, and it felt like they really just wanted to like grab little pieces from here and there and see, well, what are people going to respond to? And so it was fun, and the cast was great, but they didn't have that much of a cohesive story. It was almost like they had these various patches that they were just desperately trying to stitch together, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. But season 2 is a coherent story, and I'm enjoying it a lot. So,
another one like that is Foundation, where I don't like every frame,
Mhm.
but there's some great moments, and I'm glad that I skimmed through it to see, wow, that CG city is just stunning. Or, oh, that's a really cool sci-fi idea. And the show that I've really liked recently is Bosch Legacy. That's one
Mhm.
where it's cooking at all cylinders, but it's not science fiction. It's
It's not
detective.
science fiction. Yeah. No, but it certainly shows that entertainment is alive and well. On a different genre, I really enjoyed Reacher, which
Oh,
is,
yes,
that's
Reacher.
just big fun.
Yes.
We just finished, though I don't think this is necessarily new. I think we started watching when I think season had already dropped, but the last thing I'll say, I guess, is we watched Percy Jackson and the Olympians,
Yeah.
which was really fun. They got some great actors. The writer himself, and he and his wife were two of the executive producers. So I know they came out with movies a bunch of years ago that were fine. They were not bad. They were not good. They were fine.
The TV
But
is
this,
better.
yeah, this series is really good, and I think that it's very much a young adult story. I mean, literally everybody, the heroes themselves, they're all very young. But if you like YA urban fantasy, I think this is a really well done version. I mean, they've got a cast that really plays well together. It has a great rapport with each other. And then you just had adult actors who were very good and a great production and good writing. Well, David, thank you so much for a great conversation, for talking to me about these issues, and I hope this was entertaining for the rest of you. And we'll be getting back to mostly movies and TV and superheroes and stuff next time. But I like these kind of 100-episode check-ins where we get to talk a little broader.
Yes. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We love you. And next time you tune in, we'll probably be reviewing Dune 2.
Oh yeah. Gotta see Dune. That's a big screen movie. That's a get the babysitters for the big screen. Definitely.
Yes.
See you next time, everybody. And that's it for this episode. You can find the show notes at theomegabeam.com/200. And as befits the subject matter of AI, we decided to have some fun with it. So we didn't have any movie or TV posters or stuff like that, screen captures that we could use for the art, for the thumbnail and the show note page. So I used two different AI generative art tools for images, Bing Image Creator for the thumbnail image and Night Cafe for the show notes page. Now, the prompt I used was, quote, "A benign robot calms angry science fiction fans in a movie theater." I didn't give any kind of extra information about if I wanted it to be ultra realistic or cinematic or HD or anything to sort of negatives. I didn't tell it not to do six fingers or anything like that. So I think it's interesting because neither app really captured what I talked about, but they are interesting. So check it out. Check out the thumbnail, check out the show notes art page, and see what they popped out. I think it's a really good tie-in to the discussion that we had. I also use and call out in the show notes that I used a AI chatbot in my editing software called Descript to sort of do a summary, and you can see if it gets close or not. So check it out. It's fun. It's interesting. It ties into our conversation. And if you like this episode, please leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Your reviews help people who like this stuff find our podcast. If you have any comments or suggestions, please drop us a line at info@theomegabeam.com. Be good to yourselves and each other, and we'll catch you next time.
The Omega Beam. The Omega Beam. The Omega Beam. Full stop.